Hello, I'm Michelle Elliott in Vancouver.
And I'm Judy Aldis in Calgary. Last year, almost 70,000 people moved out of BC, and most of them settled here in Alberta.
So today we're asking what it means for both provinces when people say bye-bye BC
and hello Alberta.
Yes, I just moved from Kelowna. Honestly, it had to do with the cost of living.
And now I rent a 3-bedroom house in Medicine Hat with a big yard.
They don't understand how we tolerate Alberta. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be cruel, but it's just I think it's the politics.
Our sense of close-knit community is suffering. Yeah. Like, I can't trust that people are going to be here in my life in a year or 2 years.
My girlfriend has not been pleased because she was born and raised in the Okanagan. Myself, I was raised in Grand Prairie, so this is not the worst I've seen.
Medicine Hat's the sunniest place in Canada, so it's really good for my mental health.
And thanks for joining us on CBC Radio 1 and the CBC Listen app. That's both in Alberta and British Columbia. You can watch us as well, live streaming on CBC Gem, cbc.ca/BC, and on CBC Vancouver's YouTube page.
And you can watch the show afterwards on demand on CBC Alberta's YouTube channel. That's brand new for us. So exciting for us.
Yay!
Yeah, absolutely. Out there on YouTube. All right. But for right now, we want, we got our regular phone lines open today. So if you're in Alberta, give us a call, 1-866-468-4422, or email alberta@noon@cbc.ca.
And our regular lines in BC as well, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. This is a little bit early for our BC Today audience, Judy, so I'm hoping they're awake and ready to go. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone, and you can email us as well, bctoday@cbc.ca. And if you are listening in Alberta, of course, you know Judy as the host of the Noon Call-In show there. Lovely to work with you on this, Judy.
I know. We've connected off air, but never on air. So it's great to be doing this with you, Michelle.
Yes.
And I know this time of day, you're usually getting your final coffee or something like that, glass of water.
Of many.
Of many, right. So we're glad that you were willing to start your show a little bit early to team up for this one big sort of cross-border call-in show.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're staying a little bit later.
That's right.
So more coffee for you as well. So yes, whether you live in BC or Alberta, and if you want to call in today and tell us your story, we'd love to hear from you. And we are using all of our regular phone lines.
Right. Well, lots of questions for all of you, whether you're in BC or you're in Alberta, lots of questions for you to chew on. So first of all, if you've left BC and you've come to Alberta, we want to know why you moved, what it's been like. If you are a longtime Albertan and you're driving around and seeing all those BC plates, are you thinking, okay, nice to have some new neighbors, but you're maybe a little bit worried about the competition for housing. So if you want to weigh in on any one of those issues, we want to hear from you. The number, if you're in Alberta, as always, to call 1-866-468-4422. That's toll free, 1-866-468-4422. And as always, alberta@noon@cbc.ca for your emails.
And if you're in BC, maybe you've seen your family, your friends, relatives up and leaving and heading over to Wild Rose country. Let us know, how do you feel about that? Do you feel kind of left behind? Are you losing that sense of community? Or are you considering it yourself, looking over and seeing what kind of square footage you can get? And if you run a business and you're losing workers, what does that mean for you if your employees are moving? And if you have done the other thing, if you've thought momentarily about leaving BC but decided to stay, what's keeping you here? Our numbers are 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Our email as well is bctoday@cbc.ca.
All right, Michelle. And as we speak, our first guest today on this joint show is actually getting ready to leave BC. Her name is Paula Spur. She and her partner rent a place right now in Surrey Today is moving day. They are packing up, heading to Calgary, and we have connected with Paula on Zoom. Paula, hello.
Hi.
Hi, how's the packing going?
Oh boy. So I at the store. We're waiting for movers to arrive, so you can see the wall of boxes behind me.
I see boxes behind you over the Zoom. Oh my goodness.
I was going to say, that's not just a Zoom background. That's like for real, right? Those are like real moving. And so how are you? I can't believe you took time to talk to us. That's very kind of you. How are you feeling about this move?
Well, when we first realized we needed to move, I was a little bit gut wrenched because I've built up such a great community here, both in my music hobbies and in my acting career. So to leave that behind is a bit of an ouch, but we're also excited about the life we're going to be able to live in Calgary because everything's become so expensive. We've had to move 3 times in the last 6 years, and every time we get a worse place that costs more money. It's like, we can't keep doing this. We got to get stable. Yeah, we have to get stable.
Okay, so you said needed to move. Is that, this is about affordability? Is that sort of what's driving you east?
There was a family issue as well, but when we realized that, we should definitely go care for the elderly family member that needs care because we'll be able to afford to do it. So when that issue arose, the decision was very easy to make.
Okay. All right. Paula Spur with us now. She's moving today from Surrey to Calgary. I'm Judy Aldis. I'm here with Michelle Elliott, and we've joined forces for this special broadcast. We're calling it Bye Bye BC, Hello Alberta, talking about people like Paula making the move from BC to Alberta. So if that's you, we want to know why. This kind of, migration, it affects us all. For Albertans, it has meant that our cost of living is rising. For BCers, of course, it changes the nature of communities. So whatever your story is, we hope to hear from you. If you are in Alberta, give us a call now, 1-866-468-4422. In BC, some numbers to share with you. 1-800, these are the normal numbers, of course, for BC today. 1-800-825-5950 or 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone. Did I get that right, Michelle?
You sure did.
Okay,
You've
right.
got it. Now you've got me writing down your number, so I make sure I get it right too.
All right.
It's interesting listening to Paula. You're moving from Surrey, is that right? And
yes,
not surprising because it is the fastest growing municipality in BC. And so those prices are just rising and rising as more families move from Vancouver proper, for example. And there's really placing a crunch on infrastructure there. So I'm not surprised at all. What are you hearing from your friends, your family, people in your music community?
About affordability?
About that and about you leaving. How do they feel about it?
Well, some friends actually threw a wonderful farewell party for us. And we had a big gig with 8 bands and everyone was crying and hugging. It was awesome. But everyone understands because everyone's crunch. Everybody that I know. So.
Wow. And what are they thinking about their futures there then?
Sorry, what was that?
What are they thinking about their futures there?
Oh, well, everyone's just hanging on for dear life because I did the math and you have to make 6 figures to be able to afford the going rate for a 1-bedroom apartment in Vancouver. 6 figures to make 30% of your income what you're paying for your house.
I'm sure
I don't know anyone that, I know musicians and actors and artists and we can't afford that. We just can't. And I don't want to live with 20 roommates. My partner is enough, so.
Counts for 20. What do you envision for your future there?
Well, I have done what I could to get plugged into the film and TV scene there in Calgary, though it's not as big as here in Vancouver. And I'm excited for my music possibilities. I did used to live in Alberta like 15 years ago, and so I do have some connections that still live there. And I'm looking forward to getting out my mandolin and my upright bass and starting to play some music.
Yeah.
We could always use more mandolins and upright basses in Alberta, Paula. So we're excited.
You can write a song about your move.
That's right.
It'll be a theme song. All the best to you, Paula.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we're welcome. Or no, you haven't left yet, but we're waiting. When do you leave? Soon? Oh, she's got a little button. It's I can't read it.
Calgary, something to smile about, and someone with a cowboy hat.
That's a good old. Is that an old? That's an old school Stampede pin, is it?
It sure is. Yeah.
You're ready to go. You're ready to go. Well,
I'm ready to go.
Their gain is our loss. Thank you so much for your time, Paula.
You're welcome.
Paula Spur and her partner live in Surrey, BC, but not for long. As you can see, they've got all the boxes behind them, packing up, moving to Calgary. I don't know if Paula can still hear us, but I hope she leaves. You know, I don't know. Should she wait? Should she not? Because we're getting a snowstorm any minute. I'm not sure that's going to figure into things. We love our April, May snowstorms, Michelle.
Yeah,
we do them well.
Do you really?
So, yeah. Like this is and the mantra, and I'm sure it's the same in BC. Is just like whatever moisture we can get, we'll take it any way we can get it. But yes.
Yeah, ours is the opposite. I mean, we love the green. My friend was visiting here from Calgary, used to live in BC, and she just wanted to touch all the moss on the trees because she had missed it. But yeah, we just, get through it. April showers bring May flowers. That's it. I'm Michelle Elliott here with Judy Aldis. If you're listening in Alberta, you know Judy is a host of your noon call-in show, Alberta at Noon. I have the same gig here in BC for BC Today. We are joining forces today for Bye Bye BC, Hello Alberta.
And that's because last year, almost 70,000 people moved out of BC. Majority of them came to Alberta. And so we want to know if that's you. We want to know why you moved here. Has it been what you expected it to be? If you're already in Alberta and you're seeing all these newcomers, we wonder what that's like. You're thinking, yes, I need a plumber. So maybe you're happy. Maybe you're worried about what this will mean for cost of living here as well. So either way, we want to hear your story. 1-866-468-4422 is the number to call if you're in Alberta. Alberta at Noon at cbc.ca is where you send your emails.
And for the first time in more than a decade, more people left BC for another province, mainly Alberta, than moved here from elsewhere in Canada. So in BC, are you considering doing that yourself, looking for affordable housing? And what has losing your friends, your family, employees, what has that meant for you? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can email us too, bctoday@cbc.ca. And Judy, you have a caller from
We
BC.
do, yeah. 100 Mile House. Grant is with us now from that part of BC. Grant, hello. Hey, Grant in 100 Mile House, can you hear us? Oh, I hear a little action in the background there. Yeah,
He's there.
We're both experts at filling with these
That's
moments,
right,
aren't we,
yes.
Michelle? Right?
Grant in 100 Mile House, are you there?
What would a phone-in be without a delay in a caller? All right, Grant, I'm not sure if you're there. Can you hear us? No, I think that Grant can't hear us. But I think Bonnie, right? Bonnie in Victoria?
Yeah, Bonnie, are you there? Hi, Bonnie. Okay, Bonnie is not there. Oh,
Can you
Bonnie,
hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, it's Michelle here and Judy Aldis with me as well. Hello in Victoria. What are your thoughts about this apparent exodus from BC to Alberta? Hi, Bonnie. Hi, Bonnie. I can hear Bonnie, but I think she can't hear us. So we are going to fix our phone lines. This is, by the way, a bit of a technical experiment for us because as we have ventured into live streaming, we have now joined up with Alberta. So it's a lot of lines crossing, and some of them may have not.
We thought, I know what's the most complicated thing we can do. 2 time zones, TV, radio, all at once. Here we are.
Yes.
Okay, all right. But we do have guests with us in studio, right? Or with us on studio
Sure
and
do.
Zoom. Yeah. With me in studio in Calgary is Alicia Plinichich. She is an economist and the manager of policy and economics with the Business Council of Alberta. Alicia, hello.
Hello.
And with me in Vancouver is Andy Yan, who's director of the City Program at Simon Fraser University. Hello, Andy.
Hello.
Nice to see you.
All right, Alicia, you heard Paula's story, moving from Surrey, fastest growing area in BC, as Michelle said. What goes through your mind?
Yeah. Well, I think the one thing that I thought was really interesting that she said was that it sounded like originated from Alberta. And I think that's such an important piece of the puzzle is that there's so much movement between those two provinces, right? So about 60,000 people move between Alberta and BC on any year. So the question is just net, who's the winner, right? Where are more people going? And so what we've seen in Alberta is since 2014, about 9,000 or so people net losing to BC. But the big change this year, 2023, is we saw a huge reversal. It's the biggest inflow that we've seen ever since data was collected of about net 16,000 people moving from BC to Alberta. So huge turnaround versus the trend that we were seeing.
Right. And do we know who's coming and where they're going?
So yeah, in terms of the who's coming, we can look a little bit into the age. At least we can make some educated guesses. And it really seems like it's mostly in this age group of 25 to 49. So it's kind of, young adults to maybe mid-career folks who are coming here. That's the biggest change, both for BC and for Alberta. But the second is actually the age group just one above that. So those are folks who might be retired, right? So they're not necessarily folks that are looking for work. They're just maybe looking to sell their current home and buy 2 or 3 new ones in Alberta, right?
I'm not sure you can quite do that anymore, can you? But
pretty close.
Depends where.
It definitely depends where, but pretty close. And
West
then,
Van to rural Alberta, you're good, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Vancouver, I love that comment Paula made about having a 6-figure salary to be able to afford a home. And another way to look at it is just the typical salary for somebody in BC. It would cost them 106% of their salary just to pay for home ownership costs. So just to pay their mortgage, right? Which is obviously, that's not feasible.
Yeah,
so
right.
You are looking at folks who are lucky enough to be earning even just 6 figures alone probably isn't quite cutting it. So
These numbers are so fascinating. Before I go to Andy, who I know is very fascinated with numbers as well, Andy, and here in Vancouver, we're going to try again with our callers. JC is in Vancouver. Hi, JC. Hi, JC. Can you hear me? Okay, we are going to try to get JC on the line. It looks like JC is also looking to get into carpentry, so that's something we're interested in is hearing from tradespeople. Andy, what were your thoughts when you heard about these numbers? These are from Stats Canada, right? That more than 67,000 people left BC last year. This is provincial migration. Most of them moving to Alberta.
Well, I think that a lot of this is important to note, that there's always been this kind of exchange of people moving between Alberta and British Columbia, that there is, if you will, this entire parka for raincoat exchange that occurs between Vancouver and British Columbia. Okay.
Sorry about my apologies for that. It looks like they're trying to fix the phone lines, and with that, ET came to town. So
all the bugs, yes, indeed. But I think it really talks to really that type of exchange that has always occurred between the two provinces. That it's just a kind of population that really has kind of ebbed and flowed in terms of where people find themselves in terms of landing in Vancouver or British Columbia, and then looking at perhaps some greener pastures. But then I think similarly it touches upon the kind of changes that have occurred in Alberta in terms of their ability to reach out and kind of have direct populations, just kind of then move in from British Columbia to Alberta. But then again, it's not particularly new. That, I mean, looking back in some of the headlines in the Vancouver Sun, you actually find that in 1981 that they were talking about how Albertans were moving into British Columbia. You had 35,000 Albertans coming to BC during that year, and so that a lot of that also dealt with the fact that back then in 1981, you could sell your $250,000 Calgary home and pick up a home for $75,000 in Nanaimo. So
well, and we've heard that, right? Paula was the same. She had spent time in Alberta and then moved to BC and is now moving back. So you're right, ebbs and flows. What does this mean for communities here in BC? We've just heard that it's that 25 to 49 age group, and then the next age group over, retirees. How do communities change as a result of these population changes?
That's an interesting question, and I think a lot of it then deals with the ability to interface with those respective communities, the ability to kind of quickly join up in local social cultural organizations, the real growth and challenges in schools. You have to also imagine that in those age ranges, you're also talking about school children. That really, that's going to be, I think, one of the kind of interesting aspects about this type of growth and change in terms of people not only moving for themselves, but also for their kids, thinking that it's not only for incomes, but then also for room, that they perhaps think that a 800 square foot condominium in downtown Vancouver may not necessarily where they want to raise their kids, and so they're looking for that kind of opportunity. So I think it's important to understand that it's not only just, I think, individuals making these choices, but these are family units who are perhaps looking for different and better opportunities in Alberta.
Yeah, housing is such a big part of it, isn't it, Judy?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm wondering, the BC government has made sort of many housing announcements, trying to build more rental housing, increase multi-dwelling developments, limit short-term rentals, all this stuff. Do you see, Andy, that where this might sort of stop this trend, turn it around, kind of thing? Like, what's the time frame on that?
Well, I think that's going to be the thing to watch. Is proof is in the pudding. That we've certainly seen a lot of new legislation come into play throughout for the entire province in terms of trying to spur on more housing to be developed. But then the issue is, what kind of housing this is going to be? Is this going to just bring in more studios and one bedrooms, or are they going to kind of bring in a diversity of units? And I think that one of the interesting aspects to watch about this particular legislation is actually how it's tried to ensure a diversity of housing within this these new proposed rules around zoning, height and density. But then I think it's really going to be in the pudding, and really it's not going to be also on housing, but it's also going to be the infrastructure that can support that additional growth in population.
And I'm wondering, Alicia, with the Business Council of Alberta, you're looking. Do we have a call that we can go to? We are an open. There we go. We are an open line show still. I promise. It's just that things are a little bit complicated, are they not, Michelle? We have great minds behind us sorting this all out.
They're working furiously in the control rooms.
Do we have a call from Lethbridge? I understand.
Yes, Drew is on the line. Hi, Drew.
Hello.
Yay! We have made contact. Hi, Drew in Lethbridge. Thanks for calling in. What's your experience or your thoughts about British Columbians moving to Alberta?
So I grew up in BC. I've kind of moved back and forth between Alberta and BC on a few occasions. So originally from Vancouver, grew up in Prince George. 2010, migrated to Alberta, lived in Edmonton and Jasper for a bit, and then Calgary, and then Southern Alberta. Moved to Vancouver in 2015, and then back up to Prince George in 2020. And then 2022, job opportunity brought me back to Alberta, down here to Lethbridge. And I thought for the longest time I would have just been renting, would have been able to afford a place to live. But I found a really affordable place 2 years ago here in Lethbridge to purchase. And I lucked out, and it's been absolutely fantastic since. It's been, it's a great little one bedroom condo, obviously taking my time to update it a bit here, but it's been fantastic. I now have a home-based business, and it's just been. And Lethbridge, we complain about the wind, but I'd rather take the wind here in Lethbridge over some of the crazy weather that can happen in the Lower Mainland. So.
Ouch!
It's a thing, the wind, Michelle. Did you know that in Lethbridge?
Chinooks, yes.
It's just all the time in Lethbridge. It's not even Chinook. They say that a good day is when you're not leaning. You're not at a 40-degree angle or something like that in Lethbridge. Yeah.
Oh my! We all have our weather nightmares, I'm sure. But so and you've moved back and forth. Then, Drew, what do you notice about the two provinces? Like, what are the biggest differences? Hi, Drew.
No, we had him.
He's there.
Sorry, I could barely hear you there.
No, that's fine. What do you notice is the biggest difference moving back and forth between BC and Alberta?
Well, I haven't really this isn't really too much different. Mostly just climate-wise at this point, just because it's mostly just scenery and stuff. Because when I look out, the mountains are far away here as opposed to BC, where it's trees. Especially growing up in the interior, living in the interior of BC, where there's trees and forests all around you. At least it's, and then not really much changes of anything. If anything, it's been kind of a bit refreshing in Lethbridge, because Lethbridge has got a lot of things to offer that any major community has, and for all the major things that all the things that we don't have. Calgary's just a 2-hour drive away, versus having grown up in Prince George. Prince George has got a bunch of things too there, but if you didn't have anything there, I was either an 8-hour drive, whether it's to Vancouver or to Edmonton. So
yeah, and the coulees, Lethbridge, the coulees in Lethbridge, Drew, aren't they beautiful? All right, Drew, we're gonna have to leave it there, just because now we got things sorted out technically. So we have so many calls that we want to go to.
Thanks for getting us going, Drew.
All right, thanks for that. And I believe we have a caller. We go from Lethbridge all the way to Victoria now. Bonnie, the very patient Bonnie, with us now. Hello, Bonnie.
Hello.
Oh, yay! All right, Bonnie. The small joys in an open line show. Okay, so Bonnie, you moved to Victoria. You're doing the opposite of the trend from Calgary last fall. Is that right?
Yeah, I figured I call in because I'm the anomaly. I've just turned 65 today, actually, and I grew up in Victoria and loved her, but moved to Calgary when I was 16, almost 17, and stayed in Calgary until just this last fall, and decided I was waiting for the opportunity to come back to Victoria for work, but that didn't happen. So I just threw caution to the wind, sold my place in Calgary, said goodbye to my grown children. I mean, I see them. It's not a problem. They said, Mom, do your thing. And I came out here with no job prospects and not able to retire. But I'm so fortunate to have family that I'm living with. So that's working out. And I'm so fortunate that I've been able to do contract work in my industry. So I just called because I'm the anomaly. I can't really afford to retire. I came to a city where it's expensive and I can't afford to buy a house, but I just am following my heart.
And happy birthday, Bonnie.
Yes.
Thank you.
You know, Andy Yan is here listening very intently. What did you want to say to Bonnie?
Well, welcome. Welcome.
And happy birthday.
Happy birthday. I mean, part of this, of course, is perhaps the single biggest representative for British Columbia and Alberta to say, come to BC, is the weather and the climate. But yet at the same time, I think that a lot of this, also deals with demographics, about the kind of age that one enters and the kind of changing aspects of aging in community or wanting to move. That I think is important to note. That I think that one of the interesting aspects of this is, of course, when we talk about the city of Vancouver, actually, that population that is moving out to Edmonton is precisely the population that's moving outside the city of Vancouver, and really that's also the same population that's having their first kid or their second child, and so that a lot of this, I think, has to be also connected towards kind of the changes in one's life cycle and how part of it sees that move to Alberta as part of that life cycle.
We had a caller, Judy, here a couple of weeks ago. Go ahead, Judy. Go ahead, Bonnie.
Oh, sorry. I love living in Calgary. I loved raising my children there. It has a vibrant arts community, which is the community that I'm a part of. And it was mixed feelings when I left it, but I just wanted to follow my heart, come back to my roots, so to speak. And
yeah, I hear you. I hear you. You're not alone in wanting to move from Calgary to the island. I do want to go, just because we were coming up to news time here, I want to bring in JC. JC in Vancouver with us now. Hello, JC.
Hello.
Hi. So what's your story, JC?
I am looking to become a certified carpenter, and I was looking into BCIT, but the institution never answers their phone.
Okay.
I have a lot of questions about student loans, et cetera, et cetera. Out of frustration, I just Googled stuff in Calgary, what's going on there, and people actually answer their phone there.
Okay. Well, we have an Alberta Calling campaign for tradespeople, which might not make us very popular in BC as we try and poach people like you. But so what is it? So you want to get into training, and so you're just looking for wherever you can do that, find work. Is that it?
Yes, because there's got to be something else other than BCIT and private institutions that teach the trades here.
Okay.
And I know Alberta is it's king for the trades and everything like that. So I thought, you know what?
Our campaign is obviously working. If that's the tone you're getting. All right, Alicia Planinchich, are you thinking, it's worked, obviously?
Thanks, JC.
Yeah.
We looked at some online job postings data a while back just to see what are the...
Let's turn her mic on.
Sense of it is, why not try something new?
Okay. All right, JC, thanks for that. We're going to let you go. Okay. All right, Alicia, continue on there.
And what was fascinating is the number of open postings in skilled trades has increased everywhere across Canada, but more so than anywhere in Alberta. So it's pretty timely that government is doing certain things, and we saw even in the budget there was some additional funding for places like NAIT and this big push on the Alberta is Calling campaign, sort of repositioning it to folks in the skilled trades.
Okay, Alicia, I'm just going to jump in because we're coming up to news time here. Alicia Planinchich with the Business Council of Alberta is with me, Judy Aldis, in studio.
I'm Michelle Elliott here in Vancouver with my guest Andy Yan, SFU's director of the City program, and we have come together for this special broadcast. Yes, Judy.
All right, and we'll be back with you after our news break. That's coming up next.
Talk to you then.
Hello there, I'm Judy Aldis in Calgary.
And I'm Michelle Elliott in Vancouver.
And this is Bye Bye BC.
Hello, Alberta.
And if you're in BC and you're just tuning in now, of course, this is normally when Michelle brings you BC Today. But we're doing something different today, aren't we, Michelle?
Just a little bit. We've actually already started broadcasting. Today, we're joining forces with Judy Aldis and her team from Alberta at noon. Welcome to our Alberta listeners as well to bring you this special.
And we've been hearing stories already about moving from BC to Alberta. Most of the people who left BC last year actually came here to Alberta, and we want to know if you're one of them. Maybe this is something you're considering. Maybe you've decided to hold off. Either way, we're interested in hearing your story.
And what would convince you to hold off some more? No matter where you live, though, we are using all of our usual phone numbers so you can get in touch.
So if you're in Alberta, the number, of course, is 1-866-468-4422. Again, that's 1-866-468-4422. Emails, as always, go to alberta@noon@cbc.ca.
In BC, you can dial us up 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. And you can email us bctoday@cbc.ca.
Now, we have heard from residents who've made the move to Alberta. We heard Paula, of course, earlier in the program, who's just packing, getting ready to leave Surrey for Calgary.
The boxes.
The boxes behind her, absolutely looking for somewhere a little bit more affordable to live. But in some places in BC, they're kind of finding the opposite, and that is the case in the Kootenays. And so we have reached Forrest Emmon. He is the president of the Kootenay Lake Chamber of Commerce. Forrest, hello. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Hey,
hello.
Beautiful in the Kootenays. Yeah. So what have you seen?
It is a great place to be.
Yeah, in your area, what are you seeing? What are you seeing? Albertans coming to your area?
Well, it's interesting to listen to this conversation and to hear what people say about moving from BC to Alberta. What I've seen, I moved here to the Creston Valley about 3 years ago now from southern Alberta, and as I've lived here, what we've seen, and as I become the president of this Chamber of Commerce, one of the things that we've seen is that we are getting an influx of people from both directions. So we're seeing people from Alberta, mostly from the bigger cities, Calgary and Edmonton, although I came from a small town in the Crowsnest Pass. And then we're also seeing people from Vancouver and the Lower Mainland, as well as Kelowna and the Okanagan, all coming to this area, and for various and sundry reasons.
What are those reasons?
That's a good question. When I got the call to talk about this, I did a little bit of a survey and just started talking to some of the people that I know. And there was definitely a variety of reasons. One of the biggest ones that people moved here from Alberta was climate. The getting away from -40 all winter was a big factor for a lot of people. But on top of that, affordability is a big one, and that's coming from both directions. You can sell something that's really small in Calgary or in Vancouver, and you can buy something quite big here. Just as a one-off example, my property 3 years ago, I was able to buy 6 acres with a fairly large house for only $400,000, which you're not buying anything that big in Calgary or Vancouver for that kind of money. I think also that we're seeing a big cultural shift. So one of the things that I saw from a lot of people was that they're looking for that small town, tight-knit community. And with the way that, the Kootenays, they're an interesting place, but with the way that the Kootenays have been, we have seen kind of an uptick in the economic growth and everything. Even just as a one-off example, I was talking to a person who designs houses here in town, and they've got 17 homes that they're designing currently right now. And that's just one designer for an area that is, under 15,000 people. And we see every home builder is busy, every electrician, every plumber is busy. And we see that people are saying, we want small, we want tight knit, we want somewhere that our children can, be put on their bikes and sent out to ride their bikes all day, and we're not worried about them. I had some people tell me, I was uncomfortable going to playgrounds and having to be constantly on guard against looking for needles and things like that in playgrounds, and wanted somewhere that was smaller, that seemed a little bit safer. And so the Creston Valley and, all the way up the east shore of Kootenay Lake have become this place where people have come to. They found a really amazing community that helps each other, and a community that's growing as well.
Well, as it grows, Forrest, we've seen for places like Revelstoke, for example, dealing with more of a more pressure on their housing. Do you see that happening, perhaps, that prices there will be pushed up?
That is certainly the case, and we have seen that there have been issues with housing here. The rental market at this point is full right to the brim. I know people that have been looking for rentals for 6 months and haven't been able to find anything, which of course has caused house prices to go up as well. We have the benefit of a great town council here that they've just recently started to move some money from the BC government that's come into the town into some affordable housing and some other housing developments that is going on in our community. So we're seeing that the various groups, whether it's government or nonprofits like the chambers, are really working at just figuring out how can we solve this housing problem so that people have the opportunity. But even still, even if our housing was to go up by 25 or 30%, we're still going to be a more affordable place to be than Calgary or Vancouver.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. All right. And so beautiful. I'm thinking here for our Alberta listeners who often vacation where you're from, Caslow, Nelson, Creston, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, Forrest, it was great meeting you this way. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That was Forrest Demmin. He's president of the Kootenay Lake Chamber of Commerce. I'm Judy Aldis, and I'm here with Michelle Elliott. And we've teamed up today, cross-border phone-in show to hear about all. Really, it's like people just this sort of fluidity between both provinces, right? Moving back and forth.
We're living out the story of people moving back and forth.
Yeah, and we do have Kirsten on the phone.
Yeah.
Kirsten, I think, sort of fits right into our narrative today. Kirsten is in Calgary, recently arrived. Kirsten, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Hello. Yeah, share your story with us, Kirsten.
Yes, I moved to Calgary about a year and a half ago from Cowichan Bay on Vancouver Island, although I'm from Victoria. And my husband's been working in Calgary for 13 years. He owns a company in Calgary, and he employs about 200 people. And he's been commuting back to the island for 13 years, every 10 days.
Wow.
So it was time for us to have a conversation once the girls were out of school. They're at university now. It was time for us to talk about whether I should move, and the commute for him would get a little easier.
Okay. And what's it been like for you since you got here?
Well, it's been fun. I mean, it's great to have a change midlife. I'm exploring a new city. It's vibrant. It's really culturally diverse. I wasn't expecting all the languages I hear on the street every day here. I lived in Vancouver for many years, and it reminds me a bit of that diversity that Vancouver has, which I love. And there's fantastic parks here. We got 2 little dogs, great dog walking, very friendly people. I'm in the arts. It's got a really vibrant arts community. So I like it. We've kept our house and our property on the island. We do plan to go back, but it's been a really fun change.
Interesting. And so your husband had always had his work here, right? But you kind of you raised your family on the island. Now you're both here. Do you notice, so part of the reason that the draw to Alberta is affordability? Do you notice any of that in your day-to-day life?
Well, yes. I mean, just having one tax is already a difference. And I do notice that the price of groceries on the island, because of that extra travel logistics of getting to the island, they're higher than they are in Alberta. Things are more widely available here, just being a bigger city. But we didn't lock into a house in Calgary because my husband wasn't sure how long he would be in Alberta for. And his work has been very successful in Calgary, and so he's ended up staying. But we're still renting. He's renting after 13 years, and now I think we've missed that affordability. We would have to sell our property on the island to buy here. So that's something we feel caught, I would say, maybe between the two provinces, not really sure what long term it's going to be for us here, and yet he's very much rooted here with his business.
Right. You got a lot of irons and a lot of fires there, right? You've got to, just like, 1 foot in each province, it sounds like. Super interesting, Kirsten.
Yeah.
Thank
and
you.
my parents are from Alberta, just so you know, and they moved to Victoria in the 70s. So we
back and forth and back and forth. Yeah, absolutely. All right, Kirsten, thanks for your phone call.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kirsten. I love that. Caught between the two provinces, but it sounds like it's also about the quality of life that she's getting there, right?
Yeah.
We have Jay on the line in Kamloops now. Hi, Jay. Hi there, Jay. Hi, Jay. Can you hear me?
Maybe
let's try.
Jay's making some lunch or something.
It's
you know what? I want to jump in just with a question for to pick up on something that was brought up a bit earlier in the show, Michelle. Yeah, with Alicia Planinchich with the Business Council of Alberta. I'm thinking back to JC, who phoned in earlier. Was this like, I want to be a carpenter. I'll go anywhere to get my training. And we have this Alberta is Calling campaign, which people in BC might not know about. It's like, oh, come move here. And it's focused on the trades right now. If people are people getting jobs when they move here? I mean, we know it's more affordable, but are they finding the work that they want?
Yeah, great question. I think that's the one thing that's unique about Alberta right now is housing affordability and job opportunity, right? We're the only province right now that has both of those. And when I think about 2019 versus now, that's another big change that we've had is not just we have a better affordability edge, but also we have more job opportunities just in terms of job vacancies. So I'm not sure what industry specifically he's in, but construction has one of the highest job vacancy rates in Alberta, way higher than the national average. And a part of that is because of so many folks moving here, right? Which is driving greater demand for housing. And so builders are trying to respond to that.
What pressure does this put on infrastructure in Alberta, though?
Yeah, so great question. And that's what's really interesting when you look at just the number of new builds versus the number of new households moving here. Unfortunately, we only have about basically 2 new households for every 1 new house or rental or what have you. So, I don't want to say that we're in the same position as elsewhere, but certainly it's not a good direction to be in. I mean, it's a good problem to have, right? People are coming here because it's a good place to be. It's an attractive place to be. But I think there's some work that needs to be done to make sure that we're responding to that population growth, right? Because it's not just folks from BC. I mean, as Kirsten mentioned, we've also had a lot of international migration or folks that move first to Vancouver, but then it's like the secondary wave of migration of folks that find, oh, I cannot afford this, so I'm going to look elsewhere. And so we've got a lot of people coming.
Land on the coast and then migrate. Yeah.
Right. Andy, do you want to jump in on that?
Well, I think you've touched upon a really important point, Alicia, is just really how there's a better matching of people's skills, and I think that's really something that I think there's better matching happening in a place like Alberta than happening in a place like Vancouver. I mean, you really see these really large challenges in terms of overqualification for jobs for a lot of international immigrants. That part of this, I think, is an ongoing challenge of the recognition of credentials. So I think that part of that is also the appeal in Alberta in terms of that type of match. But I think going back to perhaps a really big issue is probably going to be the challenges in rental. That I think that it's important to note that Alberta doesn't have rental caps. That I think that there is, really something to watch is really as you see this sizable population move in and also take up rental units and landlords raising prices, that there is no cap, unlike British Columbia, and how that might play out, not immediately, but then into the future is a kind of big question here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. What are we seeing in terms of, Alicia, do we know about the rental market? I was going to say we don't have rent control, but we also perhaps don't have the culture of rent evictions like we see in some other big cities that do have rent control.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
An issue here,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And so you want a market that's able to respond, right? That there's incentive, there's profit there. So you want home builders to want to build, I think is the one challenge with putting any hard caps in place. It sounds like it's a good short-term-ish solution, but longer term, that's really where you worry about are builders incentivized to actually build, because especially when you have population growth 4.4% over the year, that's basically 2 Red Deers added to Alberta over a year. You need to be able to respond, right? And so it's not just a housing. I know we're talking about home ownership a lot, but it's also in the rental market. And I myself was a part of that last year when we were offered a unit in the same building that was smaller for $200 more a month.
Right.
And
although people people in BC are like $200.
Yeah, that's nothing. I know.
Yeah. Okay. I think Jay is with us. Jay in Kamloops. Hey, Jay, can you hear us? Okay.
Hi there. Thank you. Yes. Can you hear me?
I sure can. Yeah. BC is home for you, right?
You bet. Like, we migrated here way back in the 90s to go to college and university, and we settled in the Kootenays, and we moved recently to the Kamloops region from the Kootenays due to the fact of employment. There's only a few major industries in the Kootenay region, and for our children and ourselves, we wanted to have more opportunity. The Kootenays are beautiful. They're beautiful to visit, but we needed to move. However, when we moved here and sold our home, we were anticipating being able to use that as a down payment on a purchase. Since we've been here for the past 4 years, we've seen property prices explode exponentially. Does that make me want to move to Alberta? Absolutely not. And the reason why I say that is because maybe I'm an ideologist, but I look at their current government and that scares the heck out of me. And Saskatchewan, whereas when I look at if we were to uproot and move, I would go to Manitoba. It's affordable housing. There's some great progress being made with their new premier. Their health care is starting to get on track. Right now, the state of Alberta scares me too much. Until things sort of get sorted out, I don't see it as the promised land versus Manitoba.
Interesting. So it's the politics, it's the cultural issue that sort of keeps you away. But could you like really imagine yourself moving to Manitoba?
Oh, well, I'm born and raised there.
Okay,
Winnipeg
so you have a connection.
is an amazing city. I lived in Alberta for a couple of years. I worked at Lake Louise. I've traveled all across Canada, and Manitoba just has so much to offer. So don't get me wrong, Alberta's great, but right now, like I said, I'm a bit of an ideologist, and I just find their government very petrifying. So to me, if I were to uproot and move, I would absolutely move to Manitoba. Rob Canoe's got it going on, and they're doing great things there, and it's affordable, and the people in that province are just fantastic. So I would much rather consider Manitoba over Alberta.
You're going to skip over the middle and head straight to Manitoba. I hear you, Jay. All right. It was great to meet you this way. The bugs are terrible there in the summer. You do know that, right? But it sounds like you've been there.
They're not that bad. There's tons of fresh water to swim in there.
Do I sound like I want you to stop here? I hear you. Manitoba's beautiful. All right, Jay, thank you for your phone call. It was great to have you on the show.
Interesting call. And Andy, what do you make of that? We've heard so many callers say today, moving back and forth, that ebb and flow. What does that mean for the politics, the cultures in each province?
Well, I think with that caller, it's like, goodbye, BC, Alberta. Hello, Manitoba. That may be next month's. That's next month's collab.
Yeah, that's
but then
the next show.
I think that that's a really interesting question. Is that really touching upon political culture? That we certainly see people physically kind of move and then kind of try to really kind of, I think, invest themselves into these particular communities. And yet at the same time, the kind of footprint they perhaps leave in terms of political culture, I think, is another thing to watch. That will say those that are moving from BC to Alberta kind of bring forward some of their kind of political ideas around who they vote for and why they vote for them. And mind you, also perhaps vice versa, that we see perhaps some of the kind of politics in Alberta, the long-term politics kind of perhaps shift over into BC. So I think that's really one of the kind of exchanges that occur, that this is really about not only the exchange of people, but then an exchange of ideas and kind of ideas about what the future might bring in towards electoral systems.
I'm just curious, Alicia, when you talk to people who are moving, do they ever say, typically do politics fit in? Or are they like, no, I can afford an apartment there and I can get a job there? Like, what drives most of it?
To be honest, I wouldn't say it's the reason. I mean, there are obviously a whole host of reasons for why we move. That's a huge decision that weighs on our whole life. But I think, of course, I'm a little bit biased, but I would say the economics plays into it quite a lot. Just if you look at general trends of where people are moving to and from in Canada over the past couple of decades, the economy is huge, and now it's housing affordability along with it.
Let's bring another caller, Michelle. We have Thomas, who is in Vancouver, with us on the phone. Thomas in Vancouver, you're with us on this joint Alberta-BC show. Hello.
Hi.
I'm here.
All righty. Excellent. Thomas, tell us about yourself. You're Vancouver for a long time now?
10 years. I moved here from Nova Scotia 10 years ago. 70 years old. I understand I'm in different circumstances than these people calling in. And, I moved here for 3 or 4 reasons. One was better taxes in Nova Scotia, better government, and better weather. So I knew what I moved for, and I'm sticking with it.
Excellent. they're not taking you out of Vancouver. Okay. So is it you can afford where you live, obviously?
Well, I can, but I'm not making big money. I'm not making like they're talking there, six-figure income. You don't have to. They don't know how to budget, these people. They never budgeted. They didn't get themselves good education to provide them with good jobs. So, I mean, I don't know what some of them are talking about.
Yeah, fair enough, Thomas. And do you imagine, like, all this movement, do you imagine that, that it sort of, you end up creating some of the problems that you might be running away from in some ways?
Well, not for me, but
I don't mean like personal problems here. I'm talking about affordability here. Yeah, like I'm wondering about that. Yeah, Thomas, I'm just going to throw it over to our guest for a second, okay? Yeah. So I'm thinking like Andy and Alicia, like, you look at Alberta and we're like, oh, I see the number of plates from all over the country here. And I'm thinking it's not exactly cheap here either. Like, are we going to see sort of similar issues that they've seen in Vancouver happen here?
Yeah, and it depends on your perspective too, right? If you've been here, then what you're seeing is your rent has gone up, your mortgage has gone up. So you don't really care about the affordability advantage versus BC because you don't live there, right? So it's all a little bit relative. And I would say, the unfortunate situation is that polling data shows that Albertans are more financially constrained. In fact, it's the worst that we've seen of the polling data just from this Janet Brown polling data in 2 years. So that all of this is not to say that Albertans are necessarily doing super well.
There's a personal decisions and of course other factors as well. It's been great to have you both. Thank you so much. Alicia Planincich is an economist, manager of policy and economics with the Business Council of BC, and Deanne, director of the city program at SFU. Almost done here on the show. We'll break and say bye to our TV audience. And I'm Michelle Elliott here with Judy Aldis. We are almost out of time for today. Thanks so much. Judy, what have you taken away from this hour?
Well, I was trying to imagine, just stay with me for a second here, Michelle. So imagine like a swimming pool and you got the water and it kind of goes, depending on how it's tilted, the water goes back and forth. That's what it feels like the population is. You know what I mean? There's these ebbs towards BC and then
exactly what Andy
back.
was saying.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that there might be a moment now where there's a big, movement east from BC.
Yeah.
But then, there's a fluidity, I guess. I'm sounding incredibly poetic, aren't I?
The water.
I know the water.
But it's true. And I think part of it, it will dictate perhaps and decide what our communities look like. I've been hearing from people who say it's hard to build a community when young people like myself are leaving, but do they come back after they retire? And it's all based on the demographics that do really, really being interesting. And oh my gosh, what a technical feat this show has been.
No kidding. That's right. And I'm thinking of all the people in Calgary who are like, oh my gosh, do we have the schools? Do we have the hospitals? So many issues to tease through.
That's right.
But as you say, it was a technical a feat to accomplish this, but I'm really glad that we did it, Michelle. It was great to join forces with you today.
It's been fascinating for me to hear folks in Alberta. We sometimes hear from them listening into our show. Perhaps they haven't had all their fill after your show is done. I think I want to call into the BC show now, but really great to be with you. Thanks so much.
All right. And thanks to you, Michelle. I'm Judy Aldis, host of Alberta at Noon.
I'm Michelle Elliott, host of BC Today. Thank you for being with us. And BC Today will be back coming up after this CBC News update.
Good afternoon. Demonstrators are setting up a camp at UBC to show their support for Palestinians. They are calling on the university to divest from Israel and participate in an academic boycott of Israeli universities. Premier David Eby says the UBC campus must remain safe for all students. He also says a weekend demonstration here in Vancouver that saw some people lead a chant celebrating the attacks of October 7th, which he calls reprehensible. London drugs across Western Canada are closed for a second day. Stores were abruptly shut down yesterday for what the company called an operations issue. says it's taken that step out of an abundance of caution and took immediate steps to protect its network and data. And an evacuation alert for the Burgess Creek area in the Caribou has been lifted after 8 days. The region is a rural area southeast of Quesnel. The Wildfire Service says the Burgess Creek fire is 1,800 hectares but is now being held. And now the forecast. A snowfall warning is in place for the Fort Nelson region with up to 10 centimeters expected. On the north coast, a mix of sun and cloud this afternoon with a high of 10. Highs to 0 with snow and rain in the Peace. In the central interior, a high of 9 degrees with some sun and cloud. Highs up to 10 with a chance of showers and thunderstorms in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, a chance of showers with a high of 11 degrees and a chance of showers as well in the Fraser Valley this afternoon. A mix of sun and cloud in Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley with highs up to 12. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
Thank you very much, Rob. From Vancouver for now, not moving to Calgary.
No plans on that.
No plans on that. Thank you, Rob.
You bet.
Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. This is BC Today. We're going solo for this last half hour, and we have been taking your calls on moving to Alberta. Nearly 70,000 British Columbians moved to Alberta moved out of BC last year, and many of those moved to Alberta, the province next door. And we've been taking your calls on that. What are your thoughts? What does it mean for BC? We have an email from Andy who writes, I'm not denying that things in BC are expensive, but Alberta is not as cheap as they advertise. Income tax for most people is higher in Alberta than in BC. You have to make more than about $150,000 a year to have less income tax in Alberta relative to BC. Also, as many people know, Alberta does not have a sales tax, but the PST is exempt on many items in BC. Kim writes, I was born and raised in Calgary. I lived for a few years in BC in the late 1970s when I had to move home. Wanted to move back to BC all the time I was in Calgary. I'm a CPA. In 1993, I could not get a job in Alberta during one of the downturns. There were 800 unemployed accountants in Alberta. I got an opportunity to move to Revelstoke, so I did. I have spent very little time without employment. I love the climate and the four seasons. I will never move back to that cold and windy place. Thank you very much for your emails. Lots more are coming in on this topic as well from our Alberta listeners too. bctoday@cbc.ca is where you can reach us. Welcome back to BC Today. And in our last half hour, we were taking your calls on British Columbians moving to Alberta. Now, according to Stats Canada, last year, almost 70,000 people moved out of British Columbia. And that was for the first time in more than a decade, more people leaving BC for another province. We're talking about interprovincial migration here. Most of them who left BC went to Alberta. We have been asking you why you are deciding to, or why you have left BC, or if you're still here and staying, what makes you want to stay? And so we have been taking your calls. Chris has been waiting in Victoria. Hi, Chris.
Hi, how's it going? Can you hear me okay?
We sure can. Yes, go ahead. What are your thoughts listening in Victoria?
Yeah, we moved from Calgary about 10 years ago on a recommendation from a family member that lived here in Victoria, and have basically just found that Vancouver Island, Victoria, just really seems and feels like the paradise of Canada. You know, we weren't disappointed with our move, but we were able to get in and buy properties here before the prices got too out of control. And, you know, if we were to be moving now and trying to find a way to buy a home and live here, unfortunately, I don't think there's any way that we'd be able to do it. So there's a certain level of just being fortunate that we got. And we do have some other friends who have moved from Calgary and were not able to purchase in that, you know, before that bubble started to get too big. And they've had their landlords a few different times for where they were renting sell their house from underneath their feet. And so they've had to regularly scramble to be able to find new rental accommodations, and as a result have not been able to get ahead and have not been able to work towards buying a house and feel quite stuck here and are in another scenario now where they're losing their home that they've been staying in and are having to consider maybe going back to Alberta, even begrudgingly, because this just, it's just not a scenario where they can, find a good rental place or even work towards buying a house here right now.
Yeah. And what are your thoughts, Chris, as you watch this happening around you? I mean, you have been fortunate enough to be able to, your timing was good. What goes through your mind watching what's happening with your friends and people, perhaps younger people in Victoria?
Yeah, it's frustrating looking at it from their perspective. We feel incredibly lucky with where we've landed, but these are people who have two careers, who are making good money, and that good money is barely enough to be able to keep their heads afloat, kind of renting, and there's just no way to be able to kind of make any gains. And so I think of any maybe some younger people who aren't making that kind of money yet and still trying to live here. I just can't wrap my head around how they're doing it. It seems incredibly difficult.
Yeah. Chris, thank you so much for calling in.
Thank you.
That's Chris in Victoria. And James is calling us. Actually, James is from Calgary and visiting Spence's Bridge right now, where he's calling from. Hi, James.
Hi, how are you doing?
I am well. Thanks for calling.
All right. I think people in British Columbia should be wary about the politics in Alberta. My sister was a doctor in Vancouver, and she moved to Calgary, and she's regretting the move. The politics in the medical system out there and the amount of recording or data entry the doctors have to do drives her nuts.
Administration work.
Yes.
Okay.
And
it's been a complaint here by doctors as well.
Yeah, I think it is probably everywhere. You can get rid of the borders and you probably have the same problems in everywhere. But one thing with Alberta, they're looking at going to an Alberta provincial pension plan. And what kind of political tax havoc it will create when it comes to doing your taxes, I have no idea. Nobody knows. But British Columbians should be very wary that if they move to Alberta and work there in the future, potentially they may not be getting Canada Pension Plan benefits for working in Alberta. We don't know what's going to happen yet. It's very unstable in Alberta with the United Conservative Party. They're more, I put them on the Trumpian side of things. And Albertans have no say in the politics there whatsoever, really, with conservatives in power. But
for yourself, James, you're staying put in Calgary. You're visiting Spence's Bridge, though.
Yeah, I actually own some land out here.
Okay.
Yeah, I do some experimental growing out here, testing of varieties and such.
Oh, of produce?
Fruit trees and grapevines and such.
Okay. James, thank you very much. Again, going to political cultures, Andy Yan, and James giving us his perspective there. But he's saying, if you're going to move here to Calgary or to Alberta, he's saying the grass may not be as green as you think it might be.
I think that's exactly it. Is that I think that moving to any new city does incorporate a certain calculus in terms of culture, in terms of how you want to integrate with each community, and kind of finding those opportunities to connect. I think is really one of the big challenges when you kind of move your roots and kind of plant them somewhere else. But I think that really part of this discussion about people moving from British Columbia to Alberta is really are the fields greener in Alberta, that once you kind of begin to factor in, well, first of all, the financial costs and yet also have the economic opportunities, I think that there are really the kind of questions around are you going to find the kind of levels of stability or new stability that you can in Alberta as opposed to staying in British Columbia.
Let's take another call here. Olivia is joining us from Kelowna. Hi, Olivia.
Hi there.
Yeah, and yourself, you moved from Alberta to BC, is that right?
That's right. I was born and raised in Alberta, and I started my family in southern Alberta. I worked for actually the government of Alberta and lost my job in late 2019. At the time, I was also pregnant. I worked in environmental stewardship, and so for those reasons, we had some time to kind of think about where we want to go, what we want to do, and mainly because of political reasons, we decided we did not want to stay in Alberta, so we moved to BC. At the time of our move, we had a 1-year-old, and we found it very, very difficult. We both had really good jobs, but regardless, we could not find childcare, and we could not find doctors even. So
this is in Alberta?
It became really in Kelowna.
Okay.
So it became really difficult to stay in BC, even though we wanted to leave Alberta. BC became very difficult for us to stay because of that childcare issue. Mainly, we got lucky. We did find a spot, and it worked out. But very, very difficult for young families. And I can see I met a lot of young families that were asking me a lot of questions about Alberta, about leaving BC because of those reasons.
Wow. How long did it take you to finally find childcare?
It was about 4 months, and it was really just out of luck. We met somebody at a park who was giving up a spot for their child, and we swooped in and grabbed that spot. It was about 2 years later, after we put our name on a wait list for the YMCA, that we got a spot at the YMCA.
Wow.
But if it wasn't for that fluke kind of chance that we got our spot, we would have had to leave. Like 4 months, living on just one income in BC is really difficult. So.
Sure.
So we did finally, find that spot, but again, out of luck, really.
And what about healthcare? Have you found a family doctor?
No, we still are looking. Almost 3 years later, we're still looking where we, go to urgent care when needed, or walk in clinics when needed. But we still have not found a family doctor for all three of us.
Wow. Olivia, thanks so much for the call.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's Olivia in Kelowna, touching on two big issues here, lack of family doctors and child care spots as well. And she was lucky enough to find one there. You talked about what people may find when they move, and how this is kind of, part of a pattern of ebbs and flows, right, Andy? But what kind of angst does that leave BC? Like, we were talking about this for an hour and a half, so something to worry about, or no?
Well, I think that's exactly it, is that a lot of this, I think, does cover the angst of many people living in British Columbia today, that I think that it's going to be interesting kind of see how much this kind of flows into a forthcoming provincial election, that it is really touching upon the angst, can I stay, but where do I go? That I think is going to be one of the kind of aspects of it. I mean, one has to remember there was a recent poll talking about how 50% of those that were polled in Metro Vancouver felt like they had to leave. That's not particularly a great statement about the real state of affairs, but yet I think it's also similarly, where can you go? Where do you go, not only to Alberta or across the country, in terms of feeling that one has a secure future, one sees a future of possibilities, as opposed to one that of missing possibilities, of really a lack of opportunities, that I think is going to really help shape, I think, really elections now moving forward, whether it's at the provincial or the federal level.
Yeah, good point. We have an email from Dee who writes, we came to help one of our children. We came during the horrid atmospheric river phenomenon after moving horses and chickens and all of our farm implements. So this is moving to BC. And so the pros, Dee writes, it's brighter than living in the mountains, so no seasonal depression, less rain and mud. So far, lovely neighbors, even though I had to be the one to reach out. And part of me, it sounds like Dee moved, in fact, to Alberta. And the cons, Dee writes, is holy cow, energy is very expensive. 1 month, my electric bill was $648 for 1 month. My electric bill in BC was never more than $50. As older people, we have to keep our doctors in BC, as the medical system is more of a problem getting specialists in Alberta. Okay, we drive back to the Lower Mainland for appointments every 6 weeks. Also, a fear of drought, which I know is not just an Alberta problem. And number 4, Dee writes, it's not really cheaper in Alberta. BC has provincial sales tax, but the cost of many items we need cost more, so eats up the same amount as the 7% sales tax. Okay, Dee, thanks so much for sending that in, the pros and cons of having moved to Alberta. 1:45 here on BC Today, and Dan is at Maple Lake joining us to talk about British Columbians saying bye-bye BC and hello Alberta. What are your thoughts, Dan?
I grew up in rural northern Alberta. And quite enjoyed it, and moved to British Columbia for a business opportunity in 2002. My wife was born and raised in British Columbia, so that'll be a bit of a tough sell getting her over to Alberta. But we sold our business and retired, And I found it interesting that one of your callers was politically motivated to either stay in BC or go to Manitoba, when I'm kind of the opposite. I don't really like living in a province where the cocaine is legal and the straws aren't. You know?
Well, cocaine is not legal, but you're saying the politics here don't appeal to you.
The politics in British Columbia don't appeal to me, and when you look at the electoral map, rural British Columbia is pretty much conservative. So we're governed from the Lower Mainland, and I mean that's not uncommon. That happens in Ontario with Toronto. But cost of living is not a driving force, but it certainly doesn't hurt that we can sell our condo in BC and buy a 2 or 3 bedroom house with a garage for less money than our condo.
Yeah, really good to hear from you. And so for yourself, then you're saying, you know, it's a lot of factors. Your wife having had that background here in BC, but you'd like to go back to Alberta.
Yeah, and we've got kids in both provinces, so that's not a huge issue. It doesn't matter where we live, we're going to be, you know, far away from some of them. But being retired, we have lots of time to travel. The only thing I didn't like about Alberta was the winters, and now that we go south, that's not a factor. So yeah, I'd definitely be open to doing it.
Okay, really good to hear from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's Dan at Maple Lake. Thanks so much for the call. Maddie is up next in Vancouver. Hi, Maddie.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And what are your thoughts on that movement from BC to Alberta, or perhaps back?
Well, my own experience with my employees is I do have a construction company, and I constantly lose my employees going down to Alberta. And most of them, when I ask them the reason, they tell me they either have friends or relatives there. They have gone back and forth. They can get the same salary, but the cost, especially the housing cost, is, I don't know, maybe about half the here. And they have a difficult time finding rental housing here. And when they do, it's super expensive.
Wow.
And that's the main. So I've been having this company for about 20 years. And since pandemic, I have experienced a lot of my employees. I trained them for a few months, and that's a lot of them they do. They want to go to Alberta because they get the same money, but they pay half of their expenses, almost half of what it is in Vancouver.
Wow. What does that mean for you to be losing employees and losing staff?
It means that every few months I have to hire someone, train them for a few weeks, and then, after 6 months or a year, my expectation is that guy also is going to tell me the same thing.
Wow.
Because at least once a month, at least I'm losing one employee, and I can tell you 99% of them are going to Alberta. And these are the people who have not come from Alberta, they have come from other countries. But when they hear or when they travel to Alberta and they see the housing is cheaper but they get the same pay, they give me a 2 weeks notice.
What does it say for, thank you for giving us this very, specific situation that you're in. I imagine it reflects what other construction companies are going through, because of course we have this shortage of trades workers. Alberta has this campaign to offer tax breaks now, right, to attract construction and trades workers. What does this mean for the construction industry in BC, the plans to build more housing here in the province to meet the housing demand?
So what it means, unfortunately, so my cost of operation goes up as I keep training and people living. I have to reflect that to the estimate that I give to the developers. And unfortunately, they have to, reflect it to their sales. So at the end of the day, the ordinary residents of BC, they have to pay for this because it has to come from somewhere, on the top of material and everything being so expensive now. The cost of workers keep going up, and obviously we don't seem to be able to keep up with the number of demands that we have for the housing. So in my opinion, the price will keep going up unless we can provide some incentive to people who come to BC, either, a better accommodation, more rental units, so that they don't leave. Eventually, it's a market, it's a supply and demand. If we have enough supply to meet the demand, then we don't lose our people to any other provinces, not just Alberta, but because that's so close to us, but people, they go to Ontario or to Quebec, other places where we can keep them here if we can offer them the same housing or the same kind of numbers rental as they do in Alberta.
Maddie, it's really, really good to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks for giving us that picture. I just want to go back and clarify, when our previous caller talked about legal cocaine and he was calling from Maple Lake, the clarification there is that under decriminalization in BC, people are allowed 2.5 grams of illicit substances without being subject to fines or arrests or drug seizures. That does include opioids, cocaine, methamphetamines, or MDMA. Decriminalization, though, according to, I'm looking at the First Nations Health Authority here, website says it's not legalization. And of course, this is in the news lately because the BC government is seeking to make some changes there when it comes to public use of these illicit drugs. Let me wrap up here with Andy Yan. It's so interesting to hear Maddie, and he mentioned immigrants, right? Because overall, there's still a net influx of migration, of immigration to BC. What might this mean for immigrants who arrive here, seeing the landscape?
Well, that's really going to be, I think, kind of key question here is that as people may come to a place like metropolitan Vancouver, it's whether they stay or whether they will similarly kind of see an opportunity out, whether it's Alberta or Manitoba, that they will similarly move as they learn more about Canada and kind of get their own kind of bearings within the country. But I think overall, I think it really talks to really the ongoing challenges in metropolitan Vancouver, in British Columbia, of really creating an environment through which people can see a future for themselves and also their children. And I think that is going to be one of the ongoing challenges, whether it goes into infrastructure or healthcare. So I think this is something to watch, particularly on the eve of a provincial election.
Really, really good to have you with us as our resident expert on this. Thank you.
Always a pleasure, Michelle.
Andy Yan, Director of the City Program at Simon Fraser University. 12:53 now, 1:53 in the Mountain Time Zone. Well, as you know, London drugstores are closed again in Western Canada because of a cybersecurity issue. They were closed yesterday with notes for customers to phone their pharmacist. Now, the company said on social media they were still investigating, but did not think that any customer or employee data has been affected. We're joined right now by Jamie Hari, Director of Cybersecurity with DNS with CIRA. That's the Canadian Internet Registration Authority. Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for joining us, and I appreciate your patience as we moved through our special programming there. Now, we haven't heard much from London Drugs since yesterday, and their latest update as of 10:40 this morning says basically the same thing as what I've just said. You know, they were a victim of a cybersecurity incident. They were temporarily closing stores until further notice. What should the public take away from this right now?
Well, I think the first thing to consider is that being precautious is not necessarily a bad thing. So the fact that they're taking their time to ensure that the threat has been eradicated is probably in the customer's interest just as much as it's in their own interest. So I wouldn't be concerned about that. I would say that there is it's still early days, and there's still the possibility that more information will be released about whether there was customer information involved in the breach or whether it was just internal data. So I would say be patient is the second thing I would say. And then the third is that in terms of getting these operations back up and running, there's a lot going through the heads of the leadership team at London Drugs. Part of it is the technology, certainly getting any systems that were affected, any data that was lost, recovered, but also the people in the process. So they're going through their incident response plan. If you think of it very much like a fire drill, right now, everyone who's involved from marketing to legal to the technology teams, they're all quite busy right now.
It's always stunning to hear, big companies becoming vulnerable to these kinds of issues. How susceptible are they? How are we doing when it comes to protecting? We had Life Labs a few years ago. How susceptible are these larger companies?
You raise an interesting point. I mean, the larger an organization is, perhaps the more we call it attack surface that they have that they can be attacked from. But it's not to say that any particular organization, Life Labs or otherwise, isn't doing enough. It is certainly a cat and mouse game to some extent, where
Right.
even if they're doing a great job today, tomorrow suddenly what the same is no longer considered great. So moving target, certainly. I think that it's fair to say that every organization should do more, but a lot of the times it isn't necessarily a political will or even a technological understanding. Sometimes it's resource constraints, time, money, people, skills. And we're obviously facing a global shortage. Our industry has been talking for 5 to almost 10 years now about the idea there's not enough young folks coming into our industry with the right skills and experience coming out of school to fill these seats. And so those vacancies mean organizations are really strapped, especially in situations like this.
And why is medical information, why is that a concern?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. The first is that it's regulated. So certain organizations are extra inspired to move quickly and decisively to protect it, as there's financial implications that could happen both from the government and from general litigation. But I think the other thing is the permanence of some of this data. So if you look at like a password, your email password can be changed, but your DNA cannot. So once some of this information is out in the wild, it is pretty hard to not only contain, but to sort of erase from the internet history. So it's a particularly sensitive type of information for those reasons. And then the third is there's a certain emotional aspect to it as well. People, feel very personal about their medical histories, and I think
Sure.
myself included, I was very concerned when I've heard of some of the Canadian hacks in the past, and if I'm affected, what information of mine is leaked, and it's not always readily available. You sometimes don't actually find out what made its way to the dark web.
Certainly some more questions to be asked here. And I should also say that we don't know whether it's the retail or the pharmacy side at this point. But of course, a lot of information that we're seeking from London Drugs right now. Jamie Harry, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Jamie Harry is with CIRA, the Canadian Internet Registration Authority. That is it for our show today. Thank you for all of your calls. You can keep emailing us, bctoday@cbc.ca.